Hi, and good afternoon, everyone. I know we still have some folks flooding in from the Zoom room, so I'll go ahead and give us maybe just a minute or so before we get started. But I do want to start by thanking you all for joining us this afternoon. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. Hang tight. I'll go ahead and get my own setup going on over here so you can see our presentation, and then we'll begin shortly. All right. And if I could get a verbal confirmation from our team, just making sure you can see my screen, the presentation looks good, crisp, clear, and everything. All right, amazing. So, folks, once again, thank you all for joining. We are at 101, so we're going to go ahead and get started as more folks are coming in. If you could just humor us all and put in the chat just how you're doing today, I'll go ahead and share for myself. I'm feeling very happy. It's been a great day. My energy and mood is a little electric, got those pre-presentation jitters that I think really fuels and gives us some energy today. But you can go ahead and put one word into the chat, whether it's happy, hopeful, gleeful, sleepy, maybe after lunch, whatever it may be. I'd love to hear where folks are coming in today with their energy levels. And thank you, Jessica, for welcoming the chat. Thank you, Amanda. I love your excitement. Another excited. Understand, Jennifer. Please stay safe. Please, please, very stay safe. And I see someone's already put that their camera's not working. No problems, folks. While we do appreciate you having your cameras on, we'd love to see you and engage with you that way, but it is completely fine. Your cameras are not necessary for you to engage with us today. We have some intrigued, we have some caffeinated, very, very on brand. Great, hopeful, and excited. Well, wonderful. As folks are still putting some of their feelings and their thoughts of today into the chat, I'll go ahead and get things kicked off. So once again, thank you for joining us. We know that this week and the past few weeks have been a little tumultuous for our community, so we greatly appreciate any and every moment of time that anyone can give to us and the work that we're doing, especially in such an amazing partnership and with such an amazing organization like the Kinder Institute and like Alexander JFS. So one, I just want to acknowledge where we're all coming today, and knowing that the past few weeks have been a lot, but just giving thanks and my utmost gratitude for everyone having a moment to step away from whatever is going on in our lives to give even just a moment of recognition and time to this amazing work. So I'll go ahead and kick things off by starting with our ground rules. So we do start just about all of our coffee and quality offerings, just level setting, making sure that we're all entering the space from the same kind of understanding. So our first ground rule is that this is a safe space for all of us to share, learn, and grow together. We do ask that you all have an open mind and an open heart as we all learn and grow and share our understandings and our experiences of this case study today. We also ask that you participate by sharing your knowledge and even your own experiences in the chat, or if you want to reserve your sharings for our Q&A session that we have reserved at the tail end of today's meeting. And then we do want you to remember that this is always an invitation and not ever an obligation, and to come into the space with that mindset. And I'll also have a brief plug for our Coffee and Quality Microsoft Teams channel. So this is where you can find out anything and everything and stay completely up to date with all things coffee and quality. So whether this is your first time engaging with coffee and quality, or maybe this is second and third and you haven't quite taken the bite to dive into our Teams channel, you're more than welcome to put your email into the channel if you would like to be connected in that way. And now let's talk about the actual case study itself. So this is our second case study. Our first one was completed at the tail end of last year in November with Angel Reach. And this one, we had the amazing opportunity to work with Alexander JFS, or Alexander Jewish Family Services, to work on this case study. We've been working with this team alongside our amazing partners at Kinder Institute for the past 7 months. And man, have they been amazing. The team has been incredible in really just stepping up to be inquisitive, to really understand what this case study could entail for them and all of us as a collective, but really hitting the ground running when it comes to asking questions and wanting to know how they can do more within their own organization. So for those of you asking or wondering to yourself, what exactly is a case study, Ashley? Let's just go back a few pages and start from the beginning. Don't worry, I'm going to very kindly read off of this screen of our understanding of a case study for all of us. So the Coffee and Quality case study is an opportunity for nonprofit organizations that have an established data and evaluation practices, and we're really coming together to answer a research-related question with direct support from us at United Way of Greater Houston and our partners at the Kinder Institute for Urban Research. So this opportunity lasts anywhere from, as I said, 7 months with this one, about 5 to 6 months with Angel Reach, and then still with a little bit of homework on the other end, just making sure we fully tease out and work through all the understandings and questions that we have on the tail end of this to really come to a conclusive understanding of what we're doing with the data that we have within the organizations we're working at and how we can really take that to transform the work that we're doing and push ourselves to another level. So with that being said, I'm going to kindly turn it over to our friends over at Alexander JFS to share a little bit about themselves, their amazing organization, and the work that they do.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. Laura Alter is here with me, and so we'll share the introduction. But if you go to the next slide, we are a large, complex organization with multiple service lines. And so this was a really interesting opportunity for us to determine how our different programs interact with one another as we were trying to assess our ability to sort of hit that goal of an integrated client journey within our own organization. But you see here the kind of the main service lines or the main programs within our organization are behavioral and mental health services that provides counseling for kids as young as 2 years old and up throughout the lifespan. We provide suicide prevention and mental health first aid and suicide prevention programs into the community. Laura is our manager of our Career and Employment Center, and our focus in our Career and Employment Center is really helping people earn their way out of poverty through obtaining job skills, coaching, and supporting their journey to get to a place in their careers where they're being self-sufficient. Our chaplaincy program works on providing spiritual support to people in multiple settings across the community, whether it's hospitals, nursing homes, hospice, people who are homebound and can't get out and be a part of their spiritual community in person. Morgan Zarang, who I think I saw with us today as well, heads our coaching and case management program. They provide basic needs support, financial aid. They're very busy right now providing disaster relief and support to the community. We take care of a network of about 100 Holocaust survivors who are medically fragile in our community and needing support. And then we also have disability case management to help individuals and families living with someone with a disability manage what's needed at each and every stage of life. And then in our direct services and our disability services, we have our Alexander Institute for Inclusion that puts on a citywide film and arts festival every year, Real Abilities. And then we have our amazing celebration company, which is an entrepreneurial employment program where participants with disabilities are employed by us and run a retail and online store and create products for sale and take in work from the community and help teach independence and life skills through employment. And it's an incredible program. We encourage you to come and have a tour if you'd like to see more about it. And Laura, did I miss anything?
No, I think you covered everything. We're just happy to be here. And before we move on, I just really want to publicly thank Jessica and Ashley, the entire United Way team, and the Kinder Institute. This has been a wonderful experience for us. We have learned a lot of different things and go over those later. But it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you both so very much. Carl, what an amazing just overview of everything that y'all do. As you all can see on the call today, AJFS does a lot when it comes to really providing comprehensive and holistic services for the communities they serve. So that posed an interesting question for our team over at Kinder Institute of how we can really tailor down all the amazing programs that they offer and really work to come up with a set of questions to help them kind of elevate the work that they're doing and take them to the next level. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to our friends over at the Kinder Institute to share more about the work that they've done, some of the outcomes that we came out with, and their findings with this opportunity.
Actually, are you going to stop sharing and then I share? Okay.
Yes, sorry, working between two screens. My
No,
apologies, Lee.
totally. Totally. Okay. Is that in everybody's view?
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. As Ashley said, my name is Lee. I'm a research analyst at the Kinder Institute for Urban Research. My colleague, Catherine Perez, is also here. She'll also be joining in on the presentation a little bit later. And just like Ashley said, yeah, we're here to present some of our findings from this case study and the unique opportunity that United Way has facilitated among our three organizations. So a quick agenda for the presentation. I'll cover some of the goals that we had with the case study, the general process that our three organizations followed to execute it, the methodology that we took when it came to the research, the analysis, and then I'll go through some of our primary results as will Catherine. So the primary goal was to support Alexander JFS and better understanding its organization, its programs, and their operation. And the secondary goal was to sort of at a slightly higher level pull out findings that could then be distributed among all nonprofits in the greater Houston area in order to support their data consumption and production. So the process we followed very much a partnership model among our three organizations, United Way, Alexander JFS, and the Kinder Institute, which is housed at Rice University. It was driven by an iterative process of meeting, discussing, separating out, working, and then coming back together to discuss more. And so that pertains both to the data access agreements, where we're able to pull in some of the secondary data that Alexander JFS has already collected and curated, as well as developing research questions that fit within the scope of the partnership, and that will be most useful to the organization itself. We then go off, we process the data a bit and set it up for analysis. We run our analyses to answer the research questions, share them back with AJFS, and then turn around and do some follow-ups, again, in order to make the research process as useful as possible. So these are the three research questions that we addressed. They're a little bit wordy, but generally we were interested in describing the way that services are administered across several different departments that Alexander JFS has, as Carl just ran through. And then we were interested in how clients were moving, quote unquote, moving across departments in terms of their receipt of different services in different areas. And so now I'm going to kick it over to Catherine, who covered that first research question.
Thank you, Lee, for setting that up. So for the first research question, what is the current breakdown of AJFS's service administration, including the most common services provided, the frequency in which clients engage with multiple services within and across departments, and then duration of engagement? So for the research plan, to answer this research question, we used descriptive statistics, which included measures of central tendency. So for example, mean and median. We also included frequencies and percentages. And then for the variables that we used, that was number of services received, type of each service, and then the department in which each service was received. So before we get into the results, we wanted to show how we arrived at the analytic sample and first recognize that this is secondary data analysis, and it used data collected by Alexander JFS, and the analyses included data that were collected between 2021 through 2023, and it included more than 2,400 adult clients served. And then the departments that were used within the analyses include behavioral mental health services, so BMHS, case management, disability services, financial, MSO, and then senior adult. So first we took all services between the years of 2021 to 2023. So we started at about 116,000 total services provided. And then we removed all clients who were under the age of 18 at time of service. We also removed services that were considered missing within the data, and then any service that was labeled as a cancel or no-show were also removed. This resulted in a final analytic sample for over 87,000 total services provided. And the most common services provided were phone email, session, financial aid requests, telehealth by client, and then case management. And then when breaking it down by department, about 31% of the total number of services administered came from behavioral mental health services, 6% were from case management, 20% were from disability, 19% were from financial, 15% were from MSO, and then 8% were from senior adult.
So just for clarification here, MSO here refers to our Career and Employment Center.
Thank you for adding that. And so one of the questions that Alexandra JFS had was regarding the top 10 services by department. And so we provided an example of this here, and this ranks the top 10 services for behavioral and mental health. And as you can see, the top or most common services included telehealth by client, phone, email, and then telehealth support group.
Can I clarify on the telehealth client? Telehealth can involve individual therapy. It can involve family therapy, group therapy in our behavioral health department. And it just because of the way it was labeled, it's coming off as telehealth, but that's more of the location. And so some of those services would really be individual therapy. It just happened to be on telehealth, especially during the COVID times.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think that's an important point. During COVID, there was a much greater shift from in-person therapy, obviously, to virtual. And so that's what you're seeing here.
Thank you both. So we were also interested in the number of clients engaging with multiple services. So as mentioned, there were over 2,400 clients that were served. And of those clients engaging in multiple services, about 70% were. And then when looking at services across department, about 30% of clients engaged in one service within one department, about a third or 33% engage in two or more services within one department, and then about 38% of clients engage in two or more services across multiple departments. We were also interested in the distribution of these services by clients. And so we created two groups where about 25% of the clients, looking at the top 25% of clients, so this translated into more than 36 services, and then split the sample into two groups. So on one end, you have 75% of clients, and then on the other end, you have the top 25% of clients receiving those greater number of services. And so this shows that distribution of those two groups. And on the left side, you have over 1,800 clients, so that's roughly 75% receiving 36 services or less. And this had a mean number of services at 8.3 with a median of 4. And you can look at the other side, which is the top 25%, or those receiving more than 36 services, and they had a mean number of services used at about 117.6, and then the median of number of services was 84. And then looking at these groups, it's the same two separate groups, but they're separated by department. And then as you can see, looking at, for example, behavioral and mental health services, of those 75% of clients that were receiving 36 services or less, they were utilizing about 6,200 services compared to those in the other group, which was about 21,000 services. So meaning 611 clients who were receiving more than 36 services by that department were utilizing that number of services in total. And this shows that same distribution, but through percentages on a chart. And as you can see in the lighter blue-gray color, those are the individuals receiving more than 36 services, which do make up a larger percentage of the total services rendered. Especially when you look at disability, you'll see that 98% of those who are utilizing the services within the disability department are receiving a greater number of services. So I'm going to go ahead and send that off to Lee now.
Okay, I'm back. Thank you, Catherine. We grouped these final two research questions together because they're getting at different parts of a sort of higher level analysis, which has to do with establishing a network of relationships among these different service departments based on clients, quote unquote, moving across departments in terms of the services that they received. And so we were interested in, and Alexander JFS was interested in describing and visualizing these networks and how they are mapped in order to better understand sort of the communication and potential informal referral systems at play among their various departments that they had contained in their data, their existing data. Okay, and so the analysis plan for these two research questions, it's called network analysis. It's really just a way of visualizing relationships among sort of second order units. And so in this case, those are the departments. Those will be represented by circles. The size of the circles is proportionate to the total number of services that the department administered. So basically those numbers that Catherine presented earlier are just now in size form among the circles. And then the lines that you'll see going to and from different departments represent individuals receiving a service from one department and then receiving it from another. And I'll explain that more when I show you the actual graphs. And then you're going to see language like the from department and the to department. From just means they started at this one department and then the arrow is pointing to another, and that's the next unique department within which they received a service. Finally, the thickness of the lines reflects the number of times that the pathway occurred. And so I'll go ahead and show you now. On the left-hand side, you can see the sample of clients who are receiving 36 services or less. On the right-hand side, you can see the clients who are receiving more than 36 services. And as Catherine said, part of the reason we did this split at the 75th percentile is because a lot of our analyses were looking at service instance rather than at an individual client level. And so because there were so many more services received by this upper 25th percentile, it was flooding out some of the insights that we could find from the greater majority of individuals who just had fewer services received, if that makes sense. To get back to the visualizations here, you can see the different departments in the circles. You can see disability, for example, is smaller because there were fewer services that came out of that department. And this just gives a general sense of relationships, like sort of like a holistic view of the relationships among the departments in terms of client service receipt. But it's more helpful to look at specific departments. And so this is just a graph pulling out behavioral and mental health as the primary department that we're looking at. And this is for the sample of clients who are receiving 36 services or fewer. And so, for example, you can see if you look at financial, so the gray, the darker line pointing toward financial just represents an individual who received a service from behavioral and mental health services and then received consecutively after that a service in the financial department. Whereas the lighter blue coming into BMHS just is the opposite, the flip. So they received a service in financial and then they received one in BMHS. And you can see the thickness of the lines represents pathways that are more common. And so this is the graph for those with more than 36 services. This is them side by side. These are actually pretty similar across the two groups, although it's notable that among clients receiving 36 services or less, the lines are thicker between case management and BMHS. And so you can imagine the insights that can come from looking like at a department by department level in these graphs, just sort of understanding where the most highly trafficked pathways are and if they apply to these two distinct groups of clients or not.
So if we just look at this one particular question that, we're going to kind of look at going forward is you can see a very high number of people referred from BMHS to financial aid, but less so a smaller thickness of line to employment for career help. And so the question that we're going to look at going forward is that an opportunity? If there's that many clients in need of financial help, should we have initiated more referrals to the Career and Employment Center? So it doesn't answer the question, but it leads to some really interesting opportunities to look at referral patterns and see if we might be underutilizing a particular service.
Yeah, that's a great point. And there is like a richness in just these visualizations that I think is really important. And that's a great example. And so that's what we have for the presentation now. I do have some appendix slides. So in the Q&A, if folks have questions, I may have some supplementary slides that I can pull up. But otherwise, I believe it's going back to Ashley. Is that right?
That is correct. Thank you so very much, Lee and Catherine. Y'all both did an amazing job, not only on putting this work together, but really helping to showcase and present this information out. Because while we know we're working with AJFS for this, a lot of this information is beneficial for a number of organizations on this call and even not on this call. And then I also want to give another shout out to Carl and Laura. I mean, this is both of your work. This is your information, your data that we're all talking about. So I very much appreciate both of you adding additional color, commentary, and context to what we're sharing and talking about today. And I'm going to make sure and get another verbal confirmation. Can everyone see my presentation on my screen? All right. Thank you all so much. So now we're going to lead into recommendations. We heard a little bit from AJFS about who they are, the work that they do. We heard from Kinder about the findings, the actual case study, what went into the case study, and where we're at today. But now we're looking a little bit more at the road paved ahead for AJFS. So I do want to share that these recommendations come from three initial sources. One is definitely the information and the findings coming from the case study itself. Another is from supplemental conversations and support conversations that United Way and AJFS have been having as well. And so we're going to move forward into looking at some of these recommendations to understand where can we go and what lies ahead. So we have three recommendations, and I'm really kind of talking about them kind of in a tight nutshell space because the overall takeaway from this case study presentation is not about the recommendations itself. So I don't want us to get too tied up here, but I do want to share some of the work that we're looking ahead. And then after this, AJFS will get an opportunity to talk about some of the other work that they're doing and the other roads that they're paving as well. So the first recommendation that we've provided is really looking at their data collection to help predict successful client referrals. So a lot of us who are also working at nonprofit organizations, we know the ins and outs when it comes to referring a client. And so we know a common question is, how could we have maybe made a referral more successful, or how could we have identified if a client was or maybe wasn't as ready for a referral? And so AJFS is no stranger to this question. And it's something that we're also interested in helping to kind of answer and question and ponder alongside them. So with that, we are recommending a kind of small list of things that they can do when it comes to their data collection to help predict some more successful factors when it comes to identifying clients who may be ready or even may not be ready for a referral. So some of them are looking at how they're collecting and organizing specific and relevant data points and really helping to identify specific characteristics or even conditions to understand who these client characteristics are and what we can do to help identify clients who are or may not be ready. The next recommendation is looking at strengthening the high frequency service pathways that Lee just ended his presentation on. So we can see very clearly that they are very heavily trafficked service pathways across different areas when it comes to AJFS. But we're really interested in looking at how can we create and set up targeted protocols that may allow us to enhance and even promote the usage of these pathways. If we already have something that's working and working well at this organization, how can we not just enhance it, but strengthen it so that if we're encouraging the mobility of these pathways, then what are we also doing to make sure that it'll be sustained? So we don't want a heavily trafficked area and then it can't be sustained. So with this recommendation, we're also putting into account how do we set it up for success with additional support, either from staff or other protocols that could be in place as well. And then the last recommendation is looking at the organization from a staff-wide perspective. So we are implementing or recommending that they implement an annual staff-wide data practice training. So as we're often talking about data, we know that a very common place for a lot of us is constantly being in a place of CQI or continuously improving the work that we're doing and how we're doing it. One thing that we're finding is this may be an amazing opportunity for the organization to not only address existing protocols and existing data practices, but also to address any transitions as they're moving into and enhancing and improving their data practices to make sure that all staff are caught up to speed, but also to give them the agency and the freedom to speak about the work that they're doing and the data that they're collecting in a very comprehensive and robust way, to give them the confidence to know that the data they're collecting is being used in a very critical way, but also to understand where that's moving forward as they're looking to continuously improve and enhance the way that they're collecting their data. So again, I know that was a very brief summary of our recommendations. I'm very looking forward to when we actually provide the full robust report. You'll be able to read more and in depth about our recommendations there, but this isn't the show stealer, so I don't want us to end here. With that, I do want us to end on the actual focus of this moment, and we're going to turn it back to Carl and Laura to share more about their takeaways, their findings, and their overall experiences throughout this opportunity.
Laura, do you want to get us started with some of what we're doing next?
Okay. Ashley, there you go. So what we looked at was providing them multiple services lead to better outcomes. Our hypothesis is that in most cases, when you take care of the whole person, you do the wraparound services, your outcomes should be better. So we looked at data collection first, making sure our system is accurate for tracking referrals between Alexander JFS departments. And we identified some things that we could improve upon. We also want to identify patterns that indicate if some departments are better at initiating referrals or following through at referrals, and then collect and assess the current data as a baseline. So then in the future, we know where we started and where we're going. The metrics for outcomes is the number of referrals made and completed. The time from referral to service initiation. We want to make sure that's a limited amount of time. Client satisfaction scores, client readiness. Sometimes a client has to be ready to look for a job if they come out of the behavioral health, if they're receiving counseling. They may have financial crisis and need that financial services, but not quite be ready to look for a job. And we want to be able to identify and have the protocol for when people are ready to move from one service to another. And develop target outcome achievement rates. What are we looking for? What does success look like? And then use that success to be able to develop those protocols even further. And then client indicators, same thing, increased engagement, expressed interest in additional services. How can then we use that information to identify the clients who need these wraparound services? So improvements that we have been discussing is use our CQI committee and our manager department head meetings to review the progress, discuss challenges, and identify opportunities for further improvement. We've already started that. We have also started developing standardized surveys, forms, and templates for documenting the referrals and the client journeys, so we can capture all the information necessary to determine what is best for our clients. And then create clear guidelines and protocols for documenting the referrals and the client journeys, and ensure all the staff understand and follow these protocols. Compare clients with higher number of visits and subsequent referrals to those with fewer visits and later referrals. We're going to look for the patterns and readiness indicators and staff actions. Conduct regular audits to make sure that we're getting the information that we need and that we're able to run the reports, and then provide feedback to the staff as needed. Also encourage staff to provide feedback to us on the new documentation and CQI measures, and adjust it based on their input. And then, of course, we want to share the results and celebrate our successes with our staff.
I think one of the really exciting opportunities here as we look at the integrated client journey is to really dive into this idea that Laura mentioned about client readiness. We don't want to make a referral that's not successful because we did it at the wrong time. and create disappointment or a feeling of failure on part of the client. So we want to not only make those referrals to all the services they need, but we want to do it at the optimal time in their journey so that they feel the most success and the most ready to take advantage of that new opportunity. And so I think by the feedback that we received and some of the data challenges that we identified in looking at our current data, we're going to be able to make some adjustments that allow us to better analyze that going forward. And I think that's all what we all want is our clients to experience success and feel good about the resources that are being offered. And so I think that as exciting as this part has been, it just makes us excited even more so about the data that we're going to look at going forward.
Thank you both so very much. I cannot attest enough to how truly dedicated you all are as an organization. When I say working with both of you throughout this experience, whenever we're going back and forth in our conversation of understanding where you want to move as an organization, every time we come back and meet with AJFS again, they've already paved another brick on the road, y'all. Like they are ready to hit the groundwork running with so much energy, enthusiasm, and dedication to this work. So just want to say hats off to both of you. You both have done an amazing job, and your organization as a whole has been very dedicated to this opportunity. Enough of my gushing and personal feelings about AJFS and this overall partnership. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jessica to go ahead and lead out our Q&A. I hope this has hopefully encouraged you all to start asking and ruminating on your own questions about this opportunity, or just sharing your overall thoughts and commentary about this experience. Jessica, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashley. And I echo all of the gushing. And I really appreciate just the spirit of Alexander JFS and wanting to use their data to improve the work that they're doing, constantly striving to do that. It's been at the core of everything that they do. And so for me, that just lifts up like one point that while questions are still coming in, please use the chat or feel free to use the raise hand feature. Would love to hear your voice as well if you have a question. But one question for me that came up at the beginning of this, and it was something that we saw very early on in the findings, and it was part of the analytical sample, and that you had a very small amount of drop or missing data as they were combining all your 2021, 2022, 2023. Like that magnitude of 87,000 was just amazing to see, and like the true testament to like they have strong data practices happening at Alexander JFS. And so my question to Alexander JFS on this is as we think of the case study and it's impacting y'all, but it's also we want this to be transferable, used to other nonprofits. What is your kind of best practice for collecting data consistently from your participants?
So I'd have to say that what I consider best practice is that the data collection for CQI has to be one and the same as the data that drives your clinical work. It can't be separate work. It has to be identical. So we create our documentation system so that as our clinicians are documenting their work, they're also collecting the data that we need for CQI. If you make it added work, people look at what we all went through over the last 10 days or 2 weeks. We're all exhausted. If I needed to go back as a clinician and do a second round of documentation around CQI, when I'm tired and overworked, that's not going to happen. So we have to, so we spend a lot of time looking at each and every form, each and every data point and say, are we collecting this at the moment that it's being entered in the best possible way to facilitate our CQI analysis? And if not, that's an opportunity for improvement. And so we're trying to minimize any redundant documentation that's required. So people document once, they get it right, and they move on to take care of the next client.
Oh gosh, truer words have never been said, Carl. Measure what matters is like so critical. And like the point of reality right now, oh my gosh, that is so true. So thank you for that, Carl. There's some other Alexander JFS staff in the room as well. I would love to hear what their best practice is too for this, because this is a team effort. It wasn't just like one program area. No, it was like across the board.
Well, Jessie Burston's on the call, and she's our data guru. So maybe if Jessie doesn't mind jumping in, we might want to hear from her.
I think best practice is just making sure our data is valid, is the most important. And when we're pulling it, being as accurate as possible and really getting down into the nitty-gritty of all of it before sending it to anyone else.
I'll share one quick thing too, Jessica, is requiring your team to build time within their weekly schedule to make sure data is accurate. So I make my team schedule kind of like office days where you are taking out an hour or 2 hours of your schedule to make sure all your data from the week is clean, it's accurate, all your notes are inputted. So really encouraging an environment where data is also time sensitive and you want to get that information in correctly and also quickly, and enforcing that. I mean, my team gets tired of hearing me because I say it almost every team meeting of like, make sure your data is in for the week. But I think it creates a culture of it becoming normal and not just, redundant.
Well, Morgan, normalizing that is such a great point. That old saying too, like we're gonna be full of the sayings here, all kinds of United Way merch. Document, like if you don't document it, it didn't happen. Like, oh, you have to, right? That time. And you're in your space at Alexander JFS. And I would love to hear from Ada what yours, like, what does it look like in BMHS, so behavioral mental health, on how y'all prioritize this? Like, what's your best practice out of that?
Our team actually meet weekly, and every week we're talking about the data collections. And every meeting, we try to go over to see if we need to change anything. Is the question really asking the information that we need in order to improve our program? I think having it in our like regular meeting agenda really help everyone to think in such a way and use the data to really improve the services that we provide to our clients.
So many head nods on that I'm seeing from that, Ada. That's so important. Like, we're collecting this information, but how are we using it? What are we doing with this? And what does that look like on your day to day, your week to week, especially in that clinical setting? When this is reflecting people's emotions, their feelings, what's happening for them in their lives. And so really appreciate hearing how y'all are using that in your space. Gosh, y'all have such great best practices. So, measuring what matters, really making sure that it's tight and aligned with the work that you're doing, validating it, making time for it, using it. Like, those are all critical elements to data collection. Anything else that's burning at top of mind for any of the Alexander JFS stuff to add?
Jessica,
Yes.
Rachel Davis here. I want to also say, I'm in the development department. I also want to say that CQI and data is a part of the culture from the front desk to accounting to development to everything. Every time something happens within a program, our data team is making sure that the questions that are asked, that the clinicians are checking off for their request for financial assistance, that everything works towards us understanding how people are using it, how it is affecting the program, and what is the satisfaction of the clients and their responses and their growth as well. So it's a cultural thing across the agency. And I think for other nonprofits, that's important too. It's not just programmatic.
Yeah,
So
Rachel,
true.
you brought up an extraordinary point. Our head grant writer on Rachel's team, Beth Lacoste, I don't know if she's on the call today, but she is very tied very closely to our CQI team and has an extraordinary sophistication with understanding data. And, while Ada's team is using their data to drive clinical improvement, Beth is using that data to describe our impact in the community to our funders, which is equally important. And it allows us to continue the work that we're doing and receive additional funds. And so I would say that if your grant writing team or your development team isn't part of your CQI team, you're missing out on a huge opportunity to learn how to better tell your story to people who are interested in supporting your work.
Thank you so much, Rachel and Carl, for lifting up the importance of internal coordination around your data, around using it for different audiences. Such excellent points. And you shined a little bit of light onto like, well, how do you do that? What does that look like? because this is a pain point for a lot of organizations, that internal data coordination, the right hand, left hand, do we know what we're doing? Rachel or Carl, do you have can you shine a little bit a brighter light onto what does that look like in practice at your organization?
Yeah, I can tell you that, we've evolved over time as everybody does. It used to be, I think, when we were submitting grants, development would often sort of imagine what would be an outcome that would be beneficial to, a funder to see. Now that really goes directly to the department head, to Ada or to Morgan or to Laura or to Jamie to say, what's a reasonable outcome in this scenario? What is something that you measure? What is something that we can accurately reflect? And so there's a really deep dialogue and discussion and an ongoing partnership between our grant writers and the program, specialists, the content specialists, to make sure that what we're promising to a funder is something that's reasonable and appropriate and accurately reflects the outcome that we're looking for with that particular investment.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful to kind of hear how that looks and this at the core of why are we doing this, right? Like, why do we internally coordinate like that? So thank you for shining a brighter light on that. I really appreciated hearing that. And I think that can just ripple effect into other nonprofits. I want to, while people are putting their questions in the chat, would love to have some audience questions. I have a question. I'm going to shift gears and ask a question to the Kinder Institute team because they did two really powerful analysis for 3 of these research questions. And a critical element to this was the data to do that. And behind the data is a data dictionary. And so, you have a data dictionary that kind of helps you like understand the data so you're able to analyze it and then we can interpret it and all the great things. From your perspective, Catherine and Lee, what is a must-have in a data dictionary? I have seen data dictionaries that look all kinds of different ways, but is there some critical elements that you think are a must-have in a data dictionary? And maybe we'll start with Catherine on this one.
Sure. So I know what I look for in a dictionary, but for me, an essential component of a data dictionary is that there is some sort of key that clearly defines each variable that would help anyone outside of an organization, whether it's a research team like us or external partners, funders, and so forth, understand what data points are being collected and understand how it is measured. So ideally, you would want this dictionary to be treated as this book or document that explains how all the data are collected and measured and where someone who is not familiar with it could open it up and know exactly what each variable is. This could help with insights and identify possible limitations of the data. It also helps with interpretation of results and possibly detecting errors within the data, as well as helps with consistency, quality, and then even makes it easier to train new staff.
Yeah, I have thoughts as well. I mean, I think so from a sort of a structural level, and in my experience, like developing data dictionaries, it feels super tedious, but the detail orientation is critical. And it's very frustrating when you like want to get in and run these analyses and you're like, I know the variables, I know all these things. But a few months pass and you look back at your data set and you're not sure what things mean. And my biggest thing is like despite the tedium, the detail included in a code book is critical. And to that point, having a template is also critical. And like Jessica said, there are all different types of data dictionaries. There's not one format that everyone uses or everyone should use because data sets are different. But if you can find a template that reflects the data that you have, the data structure that you have, that is the best because it's super overwhelming to sit in front of an Excel spreadsheet and be like, okay, what do I need to do here? But yeah, finding a template and then figuring out what information you're going to need in the future. Like Catherine said, assuming like a staff person comes in who's never worked with the data before, what information do they need? And then cataloging that for every single variable is, in my experience, the most important part. And like Catherine said, we can go on and on about the utility of these tools, but
Yeah, having clearly defined processes and a data dictionary is critical to having established data practices that are sound and can sustain ultimately. And you both hit on like such excellent like points. And it's like, can it pass the stranger test? Like you live and breathe the work that you're doing every day. But if you give it to someone else who's like, I don't know what you do every day, can they easily pick that up and decipher that? And then the other side of it, it's like the data dictionary, like is detail oriented. Like your most detailed staff needs to take a look at this and say, is that detail enough? Do we need to add more things? Because that's just going to continue to help that stranger test. Um, and the template, Lee, I'm glad you called out the template to this because it can look and take so many different shapes and forms. And I think that's where sustainability needs to be what works for your organization. Because to Carl's point earlier, you're like in the day to day doing work, like working with people, working with community, and things like what happened last week come up. And like, does that template of how like you're keeping your data practices going fit and match with your organization and how y'all do things? Because if not, it's going to fall to the wayside at the first moment of like turmoil, crisis, something coming up, the day to day. And so I appreciate that. Like, make that template work for you and your organization and what you do.
Yeah, to that end, I think we always default when possible to a researched and validated data tool to measure something, because there's an already established training protocol to create inter-rater reliability, across people using the tool. I mean, you can't always do that. Sometimes you provide a unique service and you have to create your own. But then back to Lee's point, you better have a pretty stringent, training program or protocol for how you train people so that people are rating things the same. So whenever possible, if you're measuring something that there's a tool already out there, it helps with consistency across the data point.
So true, Carl. Work smarter, not harder. And use a tool that's validated. So then it's smarter, not harder. Thank you. Scanning the chat to see if there are any questions or if anybody wants to use the raise hand feature to ask another question. I think we have about time for maybe one more. And while we wait for that, I think Carl, I want to ask you another question because the pathways was really interesting, that frequency of services and how it flows. The line got bigger between financial and case management, or financial and BMHS. Like the first time I think we saw that, I was like, all roads lead to BMHS. Like it was so fascinating to see that. And so, and you kind of mentioned about like how you're like, it's rippling another good question. And when you have data and you understand it and it's good data, that here come the questions. Like, let's not fear the questions that come from data. But as you think of this in your operations and how you might use the pathways, can you expand a little bit more on kind of what that means for how you're trying to internally coordinate your services?
Look, I think we really believe, very rarely do we see a client that only has one problem in their life or one pain point, and I see Amanda nodding her head. It's similar to all United Way agencies. People come to us because life is challenging across many fronts. And obviously, we always want to start with where their pain is. If we're hungry, we want to make sure they have food. You can't, if they don't have stable housing, you can't have the attention span to do other things. But we really want our services to be impactful and far-reaching, in that people get on a better pathway and work towards more stability. But we want to do it in a way that's respectful to what they can take on and when. And so if somebody, is at the verge of becoming unhoused, that may not be the right time to make certain referrals. And so we're trying to get better at not only offering multiple services, but doing it in a way that is not overwhelming, and in a way that supports people at where they are in their unique journeys. And so I think that's part of our goal, is to become more sophisticated at layering in services in a way that supports folks, but doesn't, allows them to feel in control and get it at a rate that makes the most sense for them. And so I think that's one of the learnings that we hope, this will set us up to do a better job of learning that going forward. I see a question from someone in the chat about who should be on your CQI team. And, we really felt like we needed, clinical experts from each of the service lines that we have. We need our data experts to help us figure out how to understand it, but we needed the content experts representing each of the programs. And so we tried to balance our team with sort of content experts and then also folks with skills in data analytics and data collection so that we're answering the questions in the right way or we're collecting the data in the right way to help the content experts get the data they need to continually evaluate the impact of the program and look for opportunities to do even more impactful work in the future.
Thank you, Carl. That like representation across different departments, different functions is such a great note about who should be on the CQI team. If I can add on to Linda's question, so thank you for asking that, Linda. Goodness, we are no stranger to transition and staff role right now, Carl. How do you bring someone on and off your CQI team? Do you have like an orientation? Do you do like a quick like, hey, you're now on the team meeting? Like, what does that look like? What does that look like for y'all?
Look, I think that's probably an opportunity for us to learn and do better. I don't think we have a formal orientation process, but I think it's certainly an aspiration because it's a lot to take in. I mean, understanding data analytics, understanding how, data collected in the electronic health record gets extracted and what it means. And then just sort of this whole idea that CQI is not a punishment, that, it's meant to be a tool that helps your work. I mean, so I think we'll take that as probably a to-do to add to our list to more, create a more formalized onboarding process. I think that would be really useful to staff as they come into this work.
But Jessica, if I could add that we have also board leadership that works on the CQI. And so we have a matrix for all the kinds of expertise we want on our board of directors. And people who have background in data analysis, research, program development, and so forth are one of the categories that we always look to fill. And so it's both our staff and our leadership participated.
They're both participating in the same kind of CQI team with your board members and your staff members?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
If I could jump in and make one point, just also from the Kinder side of things, we're working on this as well. But and again, it's one of those like meticulous sort of processes, but just developing documentation out. Data dictionary has been mentioned, but even beyond that, from data collection to data processing and cleaning, just having a living document that lists out literally step by step how the data practices and processes operate at your institution is critical when someone's coming in and then has to learn the whole system. And again, I say that as like at Kinder, we are working on that as well. We're trying to build out this documentation because again, it's easy to jump into the data, but it's important to document that process almost at like a meta level. Because when other people come in, again, it's the stranger test, like Jessica said.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I would say that whoever manages your electronic health record or whatever system that you use has to be integrally involved in your CQI process because someone might say, oh, just change this form, it'll make it easier. But someone has to understand how changing that form might impact the data collection for a key metric that you're looking at. And so you don't want to make a change and accidentally break something. And so, Laura and Jesse and others are there to make sure that when we're looking to make a change to a form, that we're not accidentally destroying data that we need to report on or that we need for CQI. And so, again, it's just making sure that you kind of tie together all those key roles within the organization.
Jessica, if I could say something about United Way's role in this, they were really the leader in helping us develop an entire CQI culture. And one of the lessons that we learned was to be somewhat forgiving as you're on that path. And so after, and it might be intimidating for some of the organizations looking at this today to see where we are now compared to where we were before. But one of the things that helped is that after each situation that we have, a new program, one that we ended, one that we were successful at after the, big hurricane, whatever it is, in the post-event analysis, you're not only analyzing your service delivery, but did the data collection, did we get what we needed? Do we need to add for the next hurricane something else that we don't have information on? So it became a part of the culture, but it was a long journey for us. Where we are now, and our friends at United Way can tell you where most organizations are now who are very good at data collection. It was a pretty long journey.
It's definitely a journey. Thank you all for sharing those notes, those comments, and it all sparked from like what's in a like who should be on your CQI team, as it's not just the team, it's how it's all coming together. And yes, those processes are so critical, like documentation of those processes can't be left behind. And I really appreciate the spirit, Carl, of like, and we need like, what's our orientation and onboarding into the team? And how does that work as just another step to the documentation? And Rachel, like normalizing and acknowledging the point of like it's a journey. And I really appreciate Lee and Kinder and Carl and Alexander JFS saying like, yeah, we know we could even do better at this as organizations. And I will throw United Way's hat in that and say, yes, we as United Way can do better at that. Like we can all strive to do better, strive to improve. The way we document, the way we do our data collection, the way we talk and gather and collect. And I think all of that is definitely in service to the work of our organizations and our missions to help people in the community. So it all like ties back to that. So thank you for that.
Well, I'll just say one thing, just because I have the opportunity. United Way to us is so much more than a funder. I mean, we appreciate, the funds that we get, but your ability to be thought leaders with us and to be committed to the journey of improvement is so invaluable to our organization and to the success that I think the community has of the funded partners that you support. And so it's not the same with every funder, and it's really important for us to acknowledge and celebrate, the United Way for the way that you approach this work. And so on behalf of our organization and our board, we just want to say thank you for that, because it's really important and meaningful to us.
Thank you so much, Carl. I think that's a great note to end on, because I really just applaud all that y'all are doing. I thank you for letting us like shine a light, magnifying glass, honestly, onto the work that you're doing so others can learn from you. We are all on journeys around this across different nonprofits. It's going to look different in different organizations. So we really appreciate the opportunity to just like look behind the curtain at what's happening at Alexander JFS with this. So thank you so much. As Ashley mentioned, we'll have a research brief that comes out, so kind of a written summary of all this that folks can dive into a little deeper into the analysis, the recommendations, and how all this came together. Later on in a couple of months, we'll have that published. And so we're excited to continue to share on about what has been this amazing case study experience with Alexander JFS. So many thanks to the team at Kinder Institute, to Ashley for leading this, as well as to Alexander JFS. On the next slide, you'll see our wrap up. And we want your feedback. Feedback is a gift. We're constantly improving as well. So please share your feedback with us today on this case study presentation. We want to use this as we look to our next case study. So we're excited to kick off our next case study with Wesley Community Center. And so we'll be starting with them in August. And so can't wait to share out their findings later on in the year, or probably early next year. But thank you all so much. Appreciate your time today. And we hope to see you again in another Coffee and Quality. And again, thank you so much to Kinder Institute and Alexander JFS for being such great partners. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.